Hi, boys and girls. I'm your Peter Pan storyteller. And when you hear this sound, turn the page. Now let's read along together. Robotech Countdown.
When we left our young friend Rick, you may recall, he had just crash-landed in a fighter plane that had somehow turned into a giant robot. Meanwhile, the aliens and Trotty invaders had begun their attack on Earth. To fight off the invasion, mankind was relying on a single reconstructed battle fortress commanded by Captain Global. With his Robotech ship manned by an inexperienced crew, the captain knew he was facing terrible odds. As he paced the bridge grimly, Lisa reported,
24 unidentified objects are descending just offshore, sir.
The news caught Captain Global by surprise.
Oh, and why didn't we detect them before now?
When the main guns automatically fired at the first attack,
said Lisa.
It sapped so much power our radar was knocked out.
Captain Global frowned thoughtfully.
Those scout ships were just a decoy. Very clever strategy.
Lisa's keen eyes were glued to the monitor.
The unidentified craft have landed in the water 25 miles west of us.
She reported.
And they seem to have submerged, sir.
Call Prometheus,
snapped the captain,
and order them to send out reconnaissance choppers.
Minutes later, one of the recon helicopters radioed back.
This is PHP 202. We're approaching target area and no sign of alien craft so far. Over.
Roger, PHP 202. Approach with caution.
Lisa warned.
Craft suspected to be submerged in the ocean.
She had barely spoken when the enemy craft rose into view, guns blazing. The choppers were blasted out of the sky.
They're gone, sir.
Lisa gasped in horror.
They've been shot down.
Global clenched his fist.
And here I am,
he muttered.
The helpless captain of an untested ship with an inexperienced crew.
Well, Captain,
put in Senator Russo.
It's lucky for us that we got this ship ready in time to fight off the invaders. When do you take off?
You must think I'm out of my mind. I can't take the ship into combat with a crew of raw recruits who have never flown in space before.
Russo's eyes narrowed.
It sounds to me as though you're saying you have no confidence in your crew.
I didn't say that.
Then what is the problem?
Barked the senator.
We spent a fortune on this Robotech ship, and I don't want to see it destroyed on the ground.
Captain Global started to protest. Somehow he had to make this cigar-chewing idiot see reason.
Senator.
No, Captain. No more excuses.
Senator Russo cut him short.
Take off.
Well, if that's your order.
That's right, Captain. It is.
Gritting his teeth, Global turned back to the control console, but he murmured under his breath.
We aren't ready for combat. We just aren't ready.
Meanwhile, on a street in Macross City, Rick was struggling to figure out the strange robot-shaped craft in which he had just landed. A beautiful girl with long braided hair and her little brother Jason were watching in amazement out of a second-story window.
Wow! Look how big it is!
Said the little boy.
Be careful, Jason!
Said Min May, trying to stop him from leaning too far out.
I wonder where it came from!
He exclaimed. People on the street were wondering too.
It fell out of the sky and crashed into several buildings,
said one man, and another added in an awestruck voice.
It's as big as a building itself!
Look, it's back open up!
Cried Jason.
There's nobody running it! Wait, there he is!
He corrected himself as a human figure appeared. Rick was still dazed. He had just popped up into view, like a jack-in-the-box on the pilot's seat of his strange-looking craft.
Huh? Wow. What's going on here?
He mumbled.
Where am I?
Pilot looks confused.
Jason whispered.
Maybe he was injured in the crash,
said Min May. Rick noticed them staring at him.
I must be seeing things. This used to be a fighter plane,
he said.
Excuse me, what is this? I mean, what does it look like to you?
Some kind of robot, I think.
Min May said helpfully. Rick was relieved to hear it.
Oh, great. Wow. When I got into this thing, it was an aircraft. I thought I'd gone nuts.
He broke off and glanced around as an auto horn honked loudly.
What?
Get that thing off the road!
shouted the driver of a big tractor trailer.
I have a truckload of vital military supplies to deliver, and I'm in a hurry. Now move it!
Rick scratched his head.
I don't know how it works, but I'll try.
Good luck.
Min-May called to him.
Thanks.
And please be careful.
She added. Her heart was beating faster because she liked the looks of this young pilot, and she was praying for his safety.
Sure, I will.
Rick promised. He got back into the pilot seat and waved to her as it sank down inside the robot.
So long.
I hope I see you again sometime.
Min-May waved back. Rick tried to understand the controls of his huge craft, but there were just too many to grasp all at once.
Well, all I can do is throw a few switches and hope for the best, I guess.
The robot hummed with power as he started the motor. It took a giant step forward, then another, and promptly crashed into the nearest skyscraper. Rick's heart skipped a beat as he heard a scream from somewhere behind the smashed wall of the building.
Oh, please tell me you're okay, Jason.
Min-May cried in terror. The air was filled with dust and rubble from the crash.
I am.
Her little brother's voice replied. Rick's head popped up again out of the robot's metal shoulder.
Are you two okay in there?
He called anxiously.
Huh? We're okay.
Came the answer. Rick heaved a sigh of relief.
Thank goodness.
Back on the Robotech command ship, the crew was preparing for takeoff, despite Captain Global's silent misgivings.
Gravity control systems 1 through 48 are green light.
Lisa spoke into the intercom mic.
Please confirm, over.
Roger, green light.
I am now switching from manual to computer control.
She went on. The voice communications continued back and forth over the intercom system. One of the bridge crew came up to report.
Priority 1 transmission from headquarters, Captain Global. Armor 1 reports completion of recovery procedures and is departing now to join Armor 10 at Rendezvous Charlie.
Thank you, Vanessa.
The captain nodded and turned to issue an order.
Claudia, check the reflex furnace and see if we've recovered full power.
Ready condition on furnace power, sir.
Very good. Anti-gravity, full thrust.
Aye, aye, sir. Full thrust.
Said Claudia, and repeated into the mic.
Anti-gravity, full thrust. Full thrust.
The tempo of action on the bridge was speeding up now as the moment of takeoff neared,
Reflex furnace now activated at full thrust.
said Sammy.
Production control board countdown is underway. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Full power.
Global ordered.
Activate the anti-gravity control system.
The mighty space fortress vibrated with a tremendous surge of power. Slowly, like some huge bird of prey straining to break free from the bonds that held it to Earth, the ship began to lift off.
Gyroscope is level, sir.
Lisa was trying her best to sound calm, but her voice trembled with excitement.
Well done.
Captain Global told his crew as the ship rose skyward. But an instant later, his tone changed as their ascent slowed. Now they were no longer rising, they were merely hovering, struggling to maintain lift.
Trim the pitch attitude immediately.
This adjustment seemed to have no effect.
It must be the gyroscope.
Claudia said tensely.
No, look.
Cried Lisa.
The gravity clouds are breaking away.
Global's face showed his dismay.
Oh, no. They're tearing away from the ship instead of lifting it. This can't be happening.
But it was happening. The proud battle fortress, which had taken so much time and effort and money to rebuild, was failing its first flight test, just when mankind needed it most.
The ship is losing altitude, Captain.
Claudia reported fearfully. Global's knuckles whitened as his nails dug into his palms.
Please, tell me I'm dreaming this.
He muttered.
It's a nightmare.
The huge craft shuddered as it hit the ground with a deafening clang and a bone-jarring thud. Everyone clutched the nearest handrail for support, and many were thrown to the deck. Captain Global pulled himself together.
Is everybody okay?
He asked. A chorus of voices came back.
I want a full damage report.
He said crisply.
Give me a computer readout on every system on board.
Yes, sir.
Lisa began the necessary routine. Global rubbed a weary hand over his eyes.
They'll never let me hear the end of this.
You shouldn't blame yourself for this, sir.
But he shrugged gloomily, knowing only too well that Senator Russo and others would blame him.
I am the captain.
He reminded her. Lisa turned to the monitor as Lieutenant Commander Roy Foker's voice came over the radio.
This is Skull Leader, Veritech Team to SDF-1. Mission completed. We met the enemy air assault and we sent them back where they came from. Do you have any word on the VT-102?
He landed in Macross City in a battleoid.
She responded.
And he's doing more damage than the enemy.
I should have known better than to leave him alone.
Roy peeled off from formation and dived toward the city.
Aha! There's the battleoid. This is Skull Leader calling VT-102. Do you read me? Over.
Hi, Roy. It's me.
Rick acknowledged.
Had a busy day down there, I see.
The Skull Leader said sarcastically as his gaze took in the damaged skyscraper.
Yeah, you might say that, big brother.
Rick tried to pass it off lightly, but he sounded sheepish.
Now what?
He asked, eager to change the subject. His eyes widened as he saw Lieutenant Commander Foker's plane sprout what looked like mechanical legs, then arms. By the time it landed, the fighter plane had changed into a giant robot like his own battleoid.
I must be dreaming.
Rick murmured.
I don't believe it.
His two new friends were as goggle-eyed as Rick at the fantastic spectacle.
That airplane became a robot, too!
Gasped the little boy named Jason. And now, boys and girls, please turn the cassette over. And his big sister Min May agreed.
Amazing!
Roy Foker quickly sized up the condition of Rick's machine. Luckily, it didn't look too badly damaged from its collision with a skyscraper.
A few small repairs and you can take that battleoid back into action,
he told the young pilot.
What are you talking about?
Said Rick.
I don't even know what this thing is, and I'm sure not qualified to operate it.
Roy ignored him and made the necessary repairs.
There, that ought to do it. Switch on low energy and depress the foot pedals slowly,
he told Rick.
Okay, here goes.
Much to his own surprise, Rick found himself actually manipulating the battleoid.
That's it.
Roy approved.
See how easy it is?
Phew.
Wow, you learn fast, don't you?
Said Jason, looking up admiringly at the giant robot and its operator.
Thanks.
Rick chuckled. Meanwhile, the children's aunt had been looking for them anxiously.
Min-May, come on.
She called.
Okay, Auntie.
The pretty girl with braids replied. Then she turned to say goodbye to Rick.
See you later. We're being evacuated.
While all this was happening, those deadly, weird-looking craft that shot down the helicopters had risen from the ocean and soared into the air. Now they were grouping for the main attack. Aboard the enemy flagship, Exodor, the one-eyed second-in-command, watched approvingly.
Battle pods have landed, Commander.
He told his chief.
We're ready to attack.
Three-Tie nodded.
Attention all gunnery crews. Prepare to give covering fire to the recon assault group. Ready all guns. Ready all guns.
A voice on the intercom acknowledged.
Set for long-range covering fire.
Macross City was bracing for the attack.
We better get moving, Rick,
said Lieutenant Commander Foker.
Pull the control mark G and we'll switch to Guardian configuration.
What the heck is a Guardian?
Rick grumbled, but he obeyed his friend's instructions.
Here goes!
With smooth mechanical action, his battleoid changed shape, once more becoming half plane, half robot, just as it did before landing.
The Guardian controls operate almost exactly like the fighter plane.
Roy explained.
You can fly it without any problems.
By this time, people were streaming through the streets as the evacuation of the city got underway. Min May exclaimed suddenly.
I have to go back for my diary. Somebody might find it and read it.
Don't be foolish, child.
Her aunt scolded.
You can't go back now.
But Min May couldn't bear the thought of anyone else reading what was intended for her eyes only.
It won't take me a minute to get it.
She promised and started to run back.
Don't worry.
No, Min-May, you don't have time. Come back.
Her aunt screamed. She might as well have been talking to the wind. Her words were drowned out by the noise of the hurrying crowd. Miles above the earth, the enemy leader grinned with evil satisfaction as he saw his plans take shape.
All guns standing by for bombardment, Commander Three-Tie.
Ordered a voice over the intercom.
Good. Level everything in the path of the assault forces, but be careful not to damage that battle fortress. I want to take it intact.
Guns blazed and buildings crumbled as the attack began. A pall of smoke spread over the scene of action. The thunder of battle was indescribable. cried Rick.
I hope everybody got out okay.
If you're worried about your girlfriend,
Said Roy.
we might check on her.
Could we?
Rick's heart leapt as he thought of the pretty girl who had watched so sympathetically when he first tried to operate the Battloid. But he crossed his fingers. There was no telling what might have happened by now to the evacuees. Aboard the Robotech Space Fortress, Captain Global was doing his best to meet the attack in spite of his disabled ship.
Do we have a fix on where that bombardment is coming from?
He inquired.
A fleet of spaceships in lunar orbit.
Claudia reported.
Beyond the range of our missiles.
Global muttered. He felt totally and maddeningly helpless.
Captain, an alien assault force is approaching from the east.
Lisa broke in.
We need air support.
Call for it.
Global ordered. She spoke into the radio.
This is SDF-1. We are under attack and need immediate support. Assume Guardian configuration.
Roger, SDF-1, coming in.
Roy Fokker responded.
All Veritech switch to Guardian mode.
He and Rick were already in contact with the invaders as the enemy forces swarmed over Macross City. Suddenly, he caught sight of Min May. She was running through the very thick of the firefight, and an enemy Battloid was closing in on her. Min May screamed in fear and dodged swiftly as it tried to capture her.
Take it easy, honey. You're okay.
Roy called out.
We'll protect you.
To his young partner, he added.
Take care of the girl, Rick. I'll hold them off.
Can't handle them alone.
Rick objected, not wanting to duck a fight and leave Roy in a tight spot.
Don't argue with me. I'll draw their fire while you get her out of here.
Rick's craft swerved toward Min May.
Stay right there.
He shouted.
I'll pick you up.
I thought you were an amateur.
She joked nervously, trying not to show her plight. Rick still wasn't sure how well he could operate this big, scary machine, but he aimed the robot's arm as deftly as he knew how. Min May gasped as the huge metal hand swooped down on her.
Get out of here, Rick.
The flight officer called impatiently.
Fire your jets.
Min May gave a faint scream as the giant hand scooped her up and its fingers closed around her. With the girl safe in his robot grasp, Rick sent his strange craft zooming upward.
How's it going?
Lieutenant Commander Fokker asked over the radio.
Everything okay?
I'll be okay, Roy.
Rick called back. There was a chuckle.
I don't care how you are. How's the girl?
The girl? Okay so far.
Gotta take good care of her. If anything happens to her, you'll have to answer to me.
Oh, don't forget, big brother, I saw her first.
Rick laughed as Roy responded.
That's how it is, huh? We'll discuss this later.
Min May was wide-eyed and breathless as they sped through the air. It was frightening enough to be flying at such a height above the ground, held only by a giant metal hand with the wind blasting into your face. But the din and sight of battle going on all around her made the whole experience even more terrifying. She cried weakly.
Oh boy, I gotta find some way to get her in here.
Rick muttered. At least she wouldn't be so exposed to enemy fire once she was huddled beside him in the flight compartment.
Uh-oh.
He had just caught sight of an enemy Battloid which looked as though it was about to attack.
Oh no!
In his burst of excitement, Rick had just released his tight grip on the controls. With a scream of panic, Min May slid from the robot's metal fingers. She was tumbling through the air, plummeting toward the ground.
Here, just grab my hand. You can do it.
Rick cried. With a desperate lightning effort, he swooped down again and sent the robot's hand shooting out to catch her, not daring to let himself think what would happen if he failed. His eye was true.
That's it.
He exclaimed and caught her neatly in the palm of the robot's huge hand. There was a sudden clang, and the cockpit shook violently. Rick gasped in horror. His robot's hand had just been shot off by enemy fire, and once more Min May was falling. There was no time to think. Rick acted by sheer instinct. He dived at supersonic speed. As he passed the girl, he reached out and grabbed her by the hand, drawing her into the cockpit. Moments later, they alighted safely on the ground. Min May was trembling like a leaf.
You're safe now. Don't cry.
Rick comforted her.
Are you okay?
She nodded, choking back her tears.
I'm all right. Now. Oh,
Her voice rose in a scream as she saw a ferocious-looking enemy battleoid stalking straight toward them. Rick had momentarily forgotten that oncoming attacker, but now his fingers darted automatically to the firing buttons on his console. Min-May watched in terror as the two metal titans blazed and hammered away at each other. Rick was none too sure how the fight might have gone if he'd been on his own. But with Min-May's life at stake, he had no intention of losing. Bit by bit, he battered the enemy robot to the ground.
You okay?
Rick turned to glance at Min-May to make sure Miss Braids was still safe. But one look at her face told him the danger was far from over. As he turned back toward his fallen foe, Rick gasped in horror. A gigantic alien humanoid had just climbed out of the collapsed battleoid robot. And now it was lunging at him, huge hands outstretched. Min-May fainted in sheer terror. Rick gaped at the creature, too panic-stricken to react. Luckily, before it could reach him, Roy Fokker swooped to the rescue and blew it away.
What was it? What was that thing, Roy?
The young pilot gulped when he found his voice.
That is the enemy. Now you know why we built the Battloids, Rick. To fight these giant aliens.
They look just like human beings.
Yeah. If you ever saw a human 50 feet tall.
The flight officer responded dryly.
Yes, you understand now why we kept this a secret.
Aboard the Robotech command ship, frantic efforts were underway to counter the attack. Since the anti-gravity system had failed, rocket power would be used to hurl the ship aloft.
Engineering reports backup rockets are fueled and ready for firing.
Lisa announced on the bridge.
How's the evacuation progressing, Lisa?
Claudia put in anxiously.
All the civilians have been safely transported to shelters. The city is deserted.
Very well,
said Captain Global.
Switch on the main booster rockets. We'll be blasting off immediately.
Lights and voice signals indicated complete readiness.
All right. Blast off!
He ordered.
Yes, sir.
Lisa switched on her mic.
Attention, Skull Leader. SDF-1 is taking off. Request air cover. Over.
We're on our way.
Roy Fokker zoomed into the air and called back to the young pilot he had just rescued.
Come on, Rick, let's go. Get the lead out.
But the other Guardian craft remained motionless.
Come on, Rick, what's the matter with you?
There was no response. Horrified by the sight of the giant alien and the death and violence he has just witnessed, young Rick was stunned. Meanwhile, the battle fortress has blasted off to rendezvous with the orbiting space platforms. The helpless Rick and the unconscious Min-May are left behind, surrounded by invaders. In our next episode, the aliens continue closing in, and the battle for planet Earth becomes even more intense. Watch for Spacefold, the next exciting chapter in the saga of Robotech.